and welcome to an emergency backup edition of Ben's Junk. Hey, Ben's Junk will never let you down. So anyway, here's what happened. Last week's video was initially on a mold cleaning rig for videotapes, and I wound up pulling it just a few hours later because I had heard from the inventor of the thing, and I had been sitting on my particular unit for a while. It had since been updated, and we agreed to swap it out for the current model, and I would pull the video and I would just redo the review once I got the new model. So yeah, that meant me having to bump up what was supposed to be this week's video to last week. So I put out my video on the Realistic Astronaut 8-band radio, so AM, FM, and shortwave and all that stuff. So that kind of left me with what to do for this week. So yeah, we're just going to take a quick, totally casual spin through this issue of Downbeat magazine from October 23rd, 1975. And I censored the address of the person who got this initially, just on the off chance that they're still there, just to be safe. So anyway, as of my shooting this less than 2 weeks ago, Quincy Jones passed away. So I guess this is a good time to give a little tribute of sorts to the man. Now, of course, this was 1975, so he was in that period of his career where he was mostly doing film scores and TV themes, most famously the Sanford and Son theme. But he had also, the guy was in his early 40s at the time, he had just had a double aneurysm, popped, and so he had been very ill for a while, and he was really just kind of hitting the comeback trail around this time. So anyway, if you're not familiar, Downbeat is mostly very jazz-centric, and they can call themselves the contemporary music magazine all they want, but because in my mind that would imply a much wider range of styles. But yeah, this is almost entirely jazz stuff. And with that, I need to throw in the disclaimer that I am not a big jazz person. When I do jazz per se, it's like jazz rock, jazz fusion. Of course, Steely Dan. Brian Auger is a personal favorite of mine. I have some Jaco Pastorius in my collection, both solo and with Weather Report. I do have a couple of stray John Coltrane albums and Miles Davis and all, but yeah, I'm not a big jazz person. I like Mahavishnu Orchestra. So I think you can kind of tell if you know those artists where I tend to come from. I tend to be more from the 70s, more rock-informed end of jazz when I hit the stuff at all. So with that, I'm not going to discuss a whole lot of the artists here. It's really the gear that's advertised in here that really interests me. So let's dig in. And rather amusingly, right out of the gate here, we have an ad for a, not a Yamaha t-shirt, but a decal to iron onto a t-shirt, a plain t-shirt. Yeah, because saving money, the starving artist and all that, I guess, 25 cents for a decal. Anyway, and hey, Buddy Rich. And of course, Buddy Rich always looked like he was about ready to kill somebody. And I've heard some stories about that guy, but I'm not a big jazz person. I'm not a big band person. So anyway, here's one that really caught my attention here. The Lyricon, which I didn't think had been introduced quite yet in 75. So the Lyricon is basically it's a synthesizer that you run this kind of flute clarinet hybrid looking thing through a synth, and you can get all these different sounds out of it. So probably the most famous use of the Lyricon would be from Tom Scott, for one, but also on for all you yacht rock aficionados, Do That To Me One More Time, Captain and Tennille. That kind of recorder sounding solo, what I really thought was a recorder at one point. No, that's actually Tom Scott himself playing a Lyricon on that one. And then otherwise, we got an ad for the Crusaders' latest album. Well, here's another appearance from Quincy, doing a little endorsement deal for Polytone amplifiers, as made by Farfisa, known for their cheesy organs from the 60s, the ones that garage bands used. Hohner guitars, we also make harmonicas. But for the life of me, I don't remember ever seeing a Hohner guitar. But then again, I guess I wouldn't have cared necessarily. So here's a good one. We got a couple of TIAC recording rigs here. So we got half-inch 4-track for less than $2,000. So presumably $1999.99. And hey, you can go all the way up to 8-track on half-inch tape. Now, you'd probably still need an outboard mixer and plenty of other gear. But yeah, next time you whine about home recording being expensive and stuff, just think about how unbelievably expensive this stuff was. $3,500 in 1975. Plug that into the inflation calculator. And the funny thing is, the only sort of thing like this I've ever seen in person would be the 4-track, a half-inch 4-track, which I saw one when I was in college, and it was just kind of sitting in a corner collecting dust, not for sale, and it's not like I could have gotten half-inch tape in, this would have been 2004, 2005. But yeah, a lot of kind of smaller studios and project studios were doing this sort of thing at the time. Okay, here's a couple of good ones. We got a little thing about the Grateful Dead introducing some more just computer-based stuff, computerized stuff, synthesizer sounds, but it never really goes into what exactly they were using. But yeah, going back to the Lyricon, I guess the Lyricon appeared on the album Terrapin Station from the Grateful Dead. There's a little blurb here about Stevie Wonder signing a $13 million contract, but he had to put out at least one new album every 7 years. If I can at least get the thing in the shot there. Well, let's see, 1975 here. If I know my Stevie Wonder well enough, he got a new one out in 76, nothing in 77, nothing in 78, a new one in 79, new one in 80, nothing in 81, and a greatest hits in 82 with a few then new cuts on it. But maybe he was able to fudge it because Songs in the Key of Life and The Secret Life of Plants were both doubles. Or Songs in the Key of Life was 2.5 albums, technically. See, I always start rambling when I do music stuff here. Anyway, hey, here's a giant getting upset that a kid stole his P-bass. All right, well, we saw the name on the cover, Bob James, who, this would have been, I guess, just like 5 minutes before he became kind of the king of the crossover jazz guys, kind of the pioneer of what we would now refer to as smooth jazz. And of course, he's probably best remembered at this point for the theme song from the sitcom Taxi, and also producing some other artists, but going more into pop stuff after this. So producing Kenny Loggins' first, I think, at least 2 solo albums. But yeah, I got a nice long interview with him discussing his time with CTI, Creed Taylor's old label, and so on. So unfortunately, I lost some of the record reviews here. Whoever had this magazine initially was clearly a guitar player, because he took half the page off because it says to detach the former right half of the page and send $1.75 for the latest Gibson catalog. But unfortunately, we lose some of our record reviews there. But we're getting into a lot of artists that I'm just not all that familiar with. I think Jean-Luc Ponty is the only one I have any even half-decent familiarity with. And they gave that 3.5 out of 5 stars. Otherwise, hey, we're better for the military to look for recruits than in a jazz magazine. Okay, here's something kind of cool for the old synthesizer nerds. A couple of ARP synths there. I call them ARP. Some people call them ARP. But we have the pretty well forgotten ARP axe there. But we also have the string machine. So if you listen to enough 70s pop, you have heard the string machine, 70s and early 80s pop. A lot of times, if it's not real strings, and you can tell when it's not, it's usually one of these bad boys, which was just shy of $1,800 back then. So a lot of dreaming stuff in here. And ARP had gone away from plugging their 2600 by this point, it looks like. So anyway, moving on here. Got another synthesizer here. And some of these were completely new to me. I had never heard of the Steiner Parker. But to me, that looks like an ARP 2600. Or dang close to it, at least. But $1,200 for that sucker, which I guess would have been plenty competitive for a synthesizer in 1975. But it doesn't say anything about it. I'm assuming it's monophonic, one note at a time. Okay, here's another piece of gear that even now would make me maybe salivate a little bit. A 16-channel Yamaha mixer. Looks like it's 16-channel and 4-bus, if I had to guess offhand. And this reminds me of some of the stuff that I wound up using in school. Some of those consoles were ancient at the time, but some of them were very cool. I mean, I got to use a Neve console for a while when I was in college that was from like 1972 or something. That was always kind of on the fritz. It seemed like you had to kind of do the Fonzie maneuver and give it a good whack to make it pop back into line every now and then. So here's another synthesizer. The EML, Electronic Music Laboratories 101. And so that's kind of, I guess you could say, a little closer to an ARP 2600. That's probably more accurate. Or maybe a mini Moog where it's all just kind of in one piece there. But it doesn't say that much in terms of specs. Now here, this truly interested me, the box. So during the 70s and early 80s, there was a little bit of an attempt, especially amongst heavy metal groups, to get away from being chained to an amplifier, for the guitarist to be chained to an amplifier and be able to run around the stage like a nut. AC/DC, of course, very famously pioneered that one. But these boxes were known to interfere with the aircraft band because, you know, it's radio. You have to run this somehow. And then the whole thing was completely blown up by Spinal Tap. And this is Spinal Tap during that scene where they're stuck playing at the Air Force Base. But yeah, that's... if you ever wondered where that joke came from, it's largely this particular unit. Now, since then, there have been new attempts at making these wireless things, and they don't interfere so much anymore, and the price has come down considerably. But I've never played with any of this. But then again, I don't play live. I don't really play at all anymore. I'd like to again someday, but it's a long ways out, I think. So here's another bit of guitar player gear here. A phase shifter from Electro Harmonics, a stomp box. And I do own a phase shifter, a cheapy Dan Electro one from the late 90s. And I just never got into the use of such things. I just never found anything that worked with anything that I ever wanted to do. But, you know, pedal effects can always be fun to play with, maybe not necessarily use in the end. Otherwise, if you want to learn how to write out a chart like Count Basie did, and I cannot read sheet music really at all anymore. I peaked at that when I was towards the end of college, and I was even then not very good at it. But basically, it's telling you that you need to learn to swing to do Count Basie. So, you know, real deep stuff there. And I've mentioned Jelly Roll Martin on Archive a few times. most recently on one of the Silent Movie Day episodes on me discussing a Charlie Chaplin VHS box that I have. Well, at the time, somebody had made copies of Jelly Roll Morton's charts from the 20s and early 30s and was copying and selling the things. And we're really just about to the end of this magazine here. We got some kind of little classified section going in there. And otherwise, this did seem interesting to me. The Instant Composer. I'm going to have to see if I can find one of these on Fleabay. But yes, you no longer have to worry about key signatures and stuff like that. You can have, I guess, a slide rule of sorts. Help you write down music. And here's probably about as close to rock as you get in here. Some basic notes about artists coming through certain towns. So John Prine is on the list and a few others. Otherwise, hey, Yamaha organ designed specifically for road use. And that's kind of the end of it. I guess I'll just leave it with this ad for Zildjian cymbals. But yeah, just a quick little spin through this issue of Downbeat to get us through the week. Next week should be a special lead up to Thanksgiving edition of another Ben's Junk. But then Thanksgiving should be the first new real proper regular archive episode in about 2 months. So hopefully things stay on track now. I'll talk to you again soon.